have any questions? You can just stand up there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah?
What I was interested, I have a question. Could you explain how using, let's say marijuana, other drugs, but marijuana specifically, how it maybe calms the brain in bipolar or what impact it has?
Thank you very much for the question. So the question being how the use of marijuana calms the brain in the context of bipolar disorder. Well, the assumption there is that it does calm the brain, implicit in that question. The problematic thing with that is that, yes, in the shorter term, marijuana may calm the brain, but unfortunately, over the longer course of time, it may work to destabilize the brain somewhat, and so at the end, it really puts the individual in an exaggerated cycle of intoxication, effectively, and withdrawal, and then using marijuana treats the withdrawal, which then exacerbates the cycle. So the unfortunate thing is that for many an individual, it may work to actually compromise the clinical situation further. That being said, some individuals will say, yes, well, taking a little bit of marijuana from time to time will help calm me. But unfortunately, individuals with bipolar disorder, it's typically a short-lived reprieve, and it exacerbates the situation dramatically.
I agree. And additionally, it's not a great explanation in terms of how it directly affects the brain, but we do know that many, in particular young people, marijuana may serve as a cover-up of feelings. So it really actually doesn't do much about actually ameliorating the symptoms, but it creates a kind of distracting mode. And if that feeling is not recognized, if you're not experiencing the significance or the salience of anxiety or whatever, depression or whatever mood piece, it makes it much more likely that when cannabis fades away, that the intensity of the emotions actually creates an even more kind of onerous desire to have more. So it's a trick statement, I think, for many to believe that it actually is kind of relaxing the brain or calming the brain. It really maybe causes people to become more distracted and disconnected from what they're feeling, really not really addressing the real issue of making something better, if that makes sense.
I just have a comment about the film. I thought it was a great film. I'm sure that there are many of you here that really enjoyed the film. The cinematography was absolutely phenomenal. I just loved the shots of them going through the barrel, and this guy was incredibly talented. And so I'm a psychiatrist. I treat individuals with bipolar disorder. I've worked with individuals with bipolar disorder for around 30 years, and one of the points that I want to emphasize here is that Andy Irons was an incredibly talented person. I mean, he had skill. You could just see it and you could feel it, and he grew up with it. He was a surfer. He also had bipolar disorder, and I think there was one comment that was made in the film where it was pointed out that he had the burden of bipolar disorder, and so he was a great surfer. Because he was a great surfer, he had talent. He also had bipolar disorder. And often individuals will say, well, gosh, having bipolar disorder creates a situation where the individual, they're more creative and they kind of attribute it to the bipolar disorder in itself. But that's not correct. I think the guy was a tremendous surfer and had bipolar disorder. What bipolar disorder seemed to do for Andy is that, and there was one scene where he's, coming back and he's sitting in his living room and he's sort of slumped down, and so he says, I'm just looking for the next thing. And so often you see or hear from individuals with bipolar disorder, and the type of bipolar disorder that Andy seemed to manifest most frequently is that they respond to something. And so he had this challenge. He had, he would go and compete. And so that drove him to, it was a lot of the energy that fueled his passion and his desire. And he also had substance abuse, so he was a
Yes.
very profound problem with substance
So
abuse.
you can certainly appreciate the complexity of the comorbidity of substance use disorder and bipolar, which makes it a significantly different kind of presentation than one who may have singular experiences.
Gentleman
Yes.
over there, yes.
Hi, well, I'd like to stay on the how to medicate this
Mhm.
kind of disease a little longer. The frustration I guess I had with the film, not because it wasn't a good movie, but because of the situation that you had a person with enormous resources, but they still couldn't get care for their illness, and so they kept using like other means to
Right.
deal with the thing. And so, it's just, I don't know what person who didn't have those kind of,
Right.
that kind of money. Yeah.
A phenomenal question. So the question, I'm just going to repeat the question because I think that your voice carries forward, not to the back. So the question is someone with phenomenal resources and didn't get care. And in the movie, that was one of the things that I noticed about it. I mean, you had one situation where he was admitted for substance abuse, and that was it. And there was no mention of him having care with a physician or seeing a doctor for managing his bipolar disorder. And no part in the movie did it state that he talked to his doctor, he was given lithium, or he was advised to do X, Y, or Z, or given or had a therapist or anything like that. So that emphasizes one of the paradoxical things about bipolar disorder, in that it is both underdiagnosed and overdiagnosed. So in a situation often where someone is, such as him, he's got resources, and of course he's got, all kinds of things going on, and everybody explains it away. He's just one, he's just this, and he's that, and they're young, and they're going to party, and they're going to, and that, and it's sort of, kind of makes sense. His wife says, we lived this life for 3 years, traveling around first-class tickets and that, and it was just, and I thought, well, that sounds kind of, it's not without its attractions, in and of itself. But unfortunately, the guy was just going strong, and it wasn't until really that he was admitted for care of his substance abuse that he came to medical attention. Or at least that was my sense. So what should have happened? I mean, someone might have picked up that there was something unusual about it. I mean, in the early scenes, there was a period where he was paranoid, and there was all kinds of things going on with that, and nobody picked up on that or sent him, or got him into to treatment. But I think that it was kind of explained away, or such as the case may be. But absolutely, he should have been cared for.
Which really speaks to the importance of diagnosis and the comprehensive services given. I mean, individuals with co-occurring disorders are often mistakenly viewed as one being more primary than the other, and therefore that's what is informing the treatment. So if one considers substance use disorder, oftentimes even some of the symptoms related to bipolar disorder may be seen to be sufficiently explained by getting them into treatment, managing in some way through some sort of psychotherapy, without recognizing that you really have to approach a co-occurring disorders, or many of them, in a way that's comprehensive and treating both at the same time. And sometimes that really starts at the initial point of diagnosing.
And one other point that I wanted to make is that the primary presentation of his illness was one of hypomania, and so that is the state where the individual is in a mood state that is not manic, and a manic state is characterized by high energy, pathological energy. In mania, the individuals are literally dancing on the tables and out of control. So this guy, his primary state was hypomania. Now, in hypomania, that can be a highly, or perceived to be a highly desirable state. So the individual's got lots of energy, very quick, fast with the jokes, brave, energetic, willing to take risks, and has a lot of leadership qualities. And so these are features and qualities in our fellow man that by and large we admire. And you see him performing there. There is a sense of admiration at the level of skill that he has, and one has a tendency to admire that. So while it's easy to explain everything away, one should appreciate the fact that the hypomanic episode, one patient said to me one time, Dr. McGinnis, listen, if you could package this stuff and sell it, you'd be really rich, because this is a very desirable state. And you could see the energy and the enjoyment and the delight that everybody else had around him. People liked to be around him. He had an infectious, nature to his persona, and then when he won and he went home and he just sort of literally poured himself into to a sofa and slumped down. You could see that rush, faded away, and then he lost his energy and he was looking for the next kind of thrill to pick them up. I've heard patients tell me, said, I really like having some kind of lever to pull. So the next project really gets me going, and I have to have something to energize me. And so he kind of had that. Gentleman in the back there.
Thank you very much. Neither of you got to see the list of his victories at the very end, because you're already facing us. But as they say, the higher you go, the further you fall. And I'm wondering if there is a middle of the road path for individuals with bipolar. Can a balanced life be taught?
So the question is, can a balanced life be taught? Yeah. Well, firstly, I want to point out that each and every one of us has moods. Each and every one of us, we fluctuate, somewhat over the course of the day, over the course of, the week, month, and year. An individual with bipolar disorder, their fluctuations, go higher and lower. So there's just a greater level of variability in an individual with bipolar disorder. So the question is, how can we modulate and bring the individual's mood swings into an acceptable range, and so that they're functioning, more or less in the regions that we find acceptable. Now, with an appreciation that there'll be blips, maybe a little bit over and below. Individuals with bipolar disorder often will have a tendency to overreact in a way that sort of good things will take them a little bit higher than the average person, and bad things will bring them down lower. What we saw in this film was the perils that are found in the interactions with the lifestyle of a celebrity who is subject to all the trials and or the offerings, if you will, of substance abuse. And I dare say that potentially this gentleman may not have landed in so many difficulties had he not been using substances.
Yes. So that's an interesting question about, and it's been a long debate within the addictions treatment arena, whether or not the call for abstinence or the call for harm reduction, or the ability to manage use in a way that you can reasonably use it without it creating significant impairment. And I think in many respects this is an individualized manner, but it appears that oftentimes it really is important for this sort of seeming a balanced approach in use really is not proven to be a very effective manner, especially in an early part of recovery. And so it seems to me that in terms of teaching individuals how to balance their life, they must also kind of recognize not only the things that trigger them and the situations that create stress, and understanding how the varying ups and downs can be managed and when they're coming, but also really take a strong look, if substance use disorder happens to be an issue, to really be honest with themselves about the capacity to use any and all substances. It creates dysregulation in multiple ways, not only neurologically, but psychologically and socially, just the ups and downs and the impact on affect is something that needs to be considered. So individuals can be taught, but it also is an individualized approach.
Now?
I don't fit the bipolar mold. I didn't get diagnosed at 18 or 19. I was 55 with menopause, and I had terrible anxiety, and they put me on an antidepressant because cognitive behavioral therapy was not working, and I needed something. So they gave me drugs, and it sent me into mania, where I was absolutely and completely out of my mind. My favorite joke used to be, of all the things I've lost, I miss my mind the most. When you have lost your mind, and you are looking, it's an out-of-body experience. Like, I slapped my priest, and I said I hated him, and it was like tucked in on his funeral, looking down and saying, who is that? Who is that doing that? And it was the most terrifying experience of my life. The care I got at St. Joe's was horrible, and there was no beds anywhere. So I was sent at midnight to Havenwood, an hour-and-a-half ambulance ride, with no one with me. When I told my husband, when I got dragged out of church and sent to St. Joe's, I said, whatever happens, don't leave me alone. This is the most terrifying thing I've ever been through. They would not let him come in the ambulance ride. They would not let him come into the building. They lost the paperwork that said he could call me. They would not let me make a phone call. I could not call my doctor to find out if the medicine they were giving me was correct. I could not call my lawyer. I said, even in jail, you get one phone call. I was sexually abused coming in, and I was emotionally and physically, abused, mentally, harassed and abused throughout my entire stay, except for Barbara, who, when I came up to the desk to say, well, you wouldn't happen to have a toothbrush, because I haven't had a toothbrush for 2 days.
Thank you.
I didn't get anything. It came with me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that one of the very, very important lessons there is that bipolar disorder, or the manic episodes of bipolar disorder, can come pretty much at any period of time in one's life. And we are constantly reminded and humbled by what we learn from individuals who experience this illness. So thank you for sharing that. And so,
One other brief
yeah, so there's a question behind. Just want to make sure that we get, there was a gentleman had a question or a person there. Yeah, thank you. We'll get back to you later. Thank you, sir.
So I was struck in the film early on, the brothers, what's on my mind is the value and advantage of talk therapy to some individuals who can find a way to express themselves that maybe they didn't walk in with. And what I'm getting at is early in the film I was struck with Andy's brother saying we never communicated any kind of love for each other. And later in the film, there were all kinds of times, many times, when Andy or other people in his circle would say, I don't have the words to express myself. I don't know how to say this. I wish I could say it, etc. And I wonder the conditioning of a young man in that milieu to, be macho and have all the kind of male conditioning. With all of your experience, do you see that as being maybe a contributing factor in people not being able to get a handle?
Well, thank you for the question. So just to summarize, the question sort of centered around the importance of talk therapy and the importance of interacting with a therapist, and also the ability to engage and exchange emotions and to feel emotions back with one's fellow man, and what role that has in the development of the disorder. So I want to firstly make several points around that. Is that the management of bipolar disorder and both the, if you will, we don't know what the origins are. We are working to try to manage it as well. But there's a multitude of forces, if you will, that are active in the evolution of the illness, and so we really don't know. I'm sad to say it is really truly not known how bipolar disorder, what the origins of bipolar disorder truly are. We think it runs, we know it runs in families. We believe that there's a biological basis for it. We know that it's helpful to have companionship and human interaction, and it's helpful to have support, and it's helpful to know and understand oneself in relationship to our fellow man and the people that we love, and getting feedback and so on and so forth. I appreciated that point that you made in the film, but I also want to emphasize that there are several ways that I thought that the brothers showed compassion and love towards each other in their actions and their plays and that sort of thing. They were certainly brotherly in their interactions and engaging in every way like that.
Yes. But there is something to be said about the ability to communicate and to express what one is feeling, and oftentimes that is a contextual, social kind of way that people learn how to communicate. And when it's effective, it's truly effective. But I've, in the 12 years that I've been working with primarily child and adolescents who are suffering with co-occurring disorders, a good number of them struggle with being able to identify what they're feeling and to really make adequate use of talk therapy. And oftentimes that's related to the conditions and circumstances they've been raised in, right? And the social mores and the understandings of what it means to be tough, what is a feeling, how to differentiate feelings, and especially when using often forces individuals to focus on highs and lows without the gray areas, or the understanding of differential types of experiences, which also can certainly affect how productive a talk therapy piece can be. But kind of referencing the question that was asked earlier, can this be taught? So I don't think it has to be predictive. If you were raised in a situation that doesn't, that kind of makes it very difficult to engage therapy, doesn't necessarily mean that it's impossible to do. And we've seen individuals get better and learn how to engage effectively treatment.
Many people, are brought up or end up being brought up that way and don't develop bipolar disorder. And individuals that were brought up in situations where there is kind and gentle interactions and what appears to be a wonderful family situation, no alcohol involved and then all of a sudden out of the blue, you get a call, said my son or daughter, I got a call from the University of wherever, and he's manic, and we have no idea how that came about. And so there are many dimensions, many roads, and many journeys that people find themselves upon that end up in a set of problems. Gentleman at the back.
Speaking of many journeys, I'm wondering about the relationship between bipolar disorder and other forms of mental illness, particularly schizophrenia. I thought I heard in the movie early on the word paranoia used for some of the things he was experiencing. And I'm wondering, to what extent is it possible that the diagnosis of bipolar disorder is offered because it's simply more socially acceptable than a more frightening sounding diagnosis?
That's a great question, and I think Dr. Mendes could probably more specifically address this, but I do know that there is often a difficulty in differentiating sometimes a disorder, especially if the symptoms have a kind of shortened historical presentation, and other factors. And I think it's real important to kind of explore that. Whether schizophrenia could explain fully bipolar disorder, oftentimes there's a sort of affect component that really kind of distinguishes those who are suffering with mood disorders that you don't always see with those who have schizophrenia. So that's one kind of aspect of making a different diagnosis. But that's a great point to be made.
Yeah, I just want to point out, though, that the experience of paranoia can be part of bipolar disorder in its more severe forms. And so, as I was watching the film and thinking about, well, what form of bipolar disorder might he have, the fact that he experienced paranoia in one of his episodes could be the fact that it's just it's a severe form of bipolar disorder. It was really short-lived, and it's often related to the mood episode in and of itself. If he experienced consistent feelings or thoughts that were paranoid in the context of no mood symptoms whatsoever, and was just well and just walked around and said, the police are following me here because X, Y, and Z. Then one would start to consider schizophrenia. But also he was using substances. He was using
Yes.
stimulants. He was using stimulants and everything like this, marijuana, all those things. They can cause all kinds of bad things and paranoia. So as I was watching it, I thought, well, that may not be necessarily related to the bipolar. It could be related to a substance abuse. But it just really reflects the fact that when you get everything into the mix, it makes it very difficult to really ascertain what is going on
Yes.
in the context of the illness. Very difficult to treat because you have the whole series of behaviors. You saw him, secretly going in Australia, procuring some heroin and cooking it up on, whatever, or probably chasing the dragon, with, heating it up on the foil and inhaling the smoke. So there's all this secretive stuff. You never know what's going on. It's just an impossible situation to get a handle on it. Now, I meet a number of individuals, in the course of my clinic that tell me, no, doctor, I don't drink alcohol and I don't use substances. And I emphasize to them, you are incredibly fortunate to not have those monkeys on your back, because any substance abuse complicates any psychiatric illness or any emotional disorder exponentially. And so it's a major problem. It presents major challenges for us in the clinics.
I agree.
Gentleman there, and then here, yeah.
So just a comment and then a question. The university is engaged in a fascinating study. It's called the AASOS2 study. I would encourage everybody to Google it. The university's tracking adolescents. I think it's from the age of 12 to 18 to 20. It's a 10-year study. They're 2 years into it, and just go learn, because it's really going to be a landmark thing when the results are announced in 8 years hence. My question revolves around the complexity of what you're describing. You have this mental health component, you have this addiction component. As you both know, makes for exceedingly difficult treatment. You've acknowledged that. And yet, at the university, there doesn't seem to be an umbilical cord connecting all of the disparate silos, so that there is an integrated approach to dealing with these problems, from inpatient therapy, outpatient therapy, pain management, psychiatry, addiction. Why isn't the university tackling what is the most urgent problem that this country has in a more integrated fashion? And how can we help? It's a public university.
So so first, thank you for the comments regarding the ABCD study, and it's a multi-site study, and so this is going to create a database and a data set that's going to be informative for generations to come. So that's very important. With regards to an integrated program for individuals with a multitude of different psychiatric and medical disorders that are going on, there are as many responses as to what the challenges are as the nature of the wide range of problems. And we would love to be able to tackle these problems. We would love to be able to integrate more. We work with the individuals in substance abuse in the mood disorders program, and we frequently, interact with them and say, we've got an individual with this disorder or that disorder. Can you help us out in this way? We also work with the multiples of specialists in other fields. In addition to psychiatric illnesses, there are the cardiac problems that are here. The challenges that we have are many. Many of them revolve around the availability of resources. So there are 2 points to the resources. Firstly, financial, just the amount of money that is needed to develop and grow these systems. And then another fundamental problem is that the manpower that we need to be able to address all these problems. And that, it sounds like, if we just brought enough money to the table, then we'd be able to solve the problems. But it's not just the money. There are not enough psychiatrists in the country and the state to be able to address all the problems. We're burdened by subtle or less than subtle regulatory issues in terms of how we can deploy nurses to be able to help and treat individuals because we're not allowed to bill for the services of RNs. We can bill for the nurse practitioners and so on. So it's a complicated question, and there are really complex problems. And every time you go into one door to try to solve a problem, as you start to address each problem, more problems arise. So I would advocate for policy change. How can the public help? Is by advocating policy change, talking to politicians, talking to people that make decisions at the level of resource allocation.
And there are growing attempts to address the need for collaboration. And in the center that I work at, that is a part of Michigan Medicine and the Addiction Treatment Services, we're fortunate to have a team of psychiatrists, social workers who also specialize or are trained to deal with co-occurring disorders and the importance of consulting. We're fortunately in the Rachel Upjohn building, which has the division of the Depression Center as well as the Anxiety Disorder Center. So it allows for close proximity, if needed, to consult with others. But it's an issue that needs more work on, and we can appreciate the complexities of making that happen, given all the number of individuals that would have to be a part of it.
And the other thing is that, so the part of the team that I lead, our focus is research and to be able to develop novel technologies and novel methods of interacting with the community. So the other thing that we're interested in is making sure that we can work in a collaborative model with with the workers and the care providers, in the community. But challenges at every level. There's a gentleman here that had a question, please. Yeah.
Again, I don't know much about bipolar, even though I'm diagnosed with it, but in that movie, was there situations where he was in a mixed state?
Thank you. So the question is, were there situations where Andy Irons was in a mixed affective state? So a mixed state is there was a time when they were talking about him saying, well, he had mania, he had depression, and sometimes he had both, and so you got a sense of the turmoil that the individual was in. So when I think about bipolar disorder, I think about it as an illness of a disorder of energy. And so in the manic state, or energy and mood. So in the manic state, you've got a lot of energy going on and a really revved up, often a revved up mood. And depression is the opposite. You have low energy and low mood. There are situations wherein the individual can have a revved up or high energy state. So a lot of energy going on inside in the context of a low mood. So what you've got then is you've got someone who's got a really negative attitude, a negative mood with a lot of energy inside, and that situation is rather dangerous. And that individual is in dire need of a punching bag, effectively, just to get that energy out. And so Andy Irons, he had the ability to go out. He was right on the shore there, and they just went out surfing. And so I think that he got a lot of those. A lot of that energy was put into surfing, but. Yeah, I think potentially he did have mixed state. It was more said that he had a mixed state rather than demonstrating any behavior that I would say was exemplary of mixed states.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. There are, the vacillation between moods would be an important kind of criteria that we didn't see a whole lot of evidence of, but it certainly could explain further whether or not there was a presentation of the mixed affect.
Oh, wonderful. Many questions.
Yeah. I think just
Oh, so we will take one more question then before, and I don't know whose hand went up first, but something way at the back there, that, so broadcast your voice, sir.
Hi, thank you for being here and answering our questions. I have a question about the current state of diagnosis and treatment with these various medications. I have a son with bipolar, and it seems he's been in and out of hospitals. It seems wherever he goes, he gets a new set of medications. They have serious side effects. As parents, we just don't know what to think about it.
Yeah, thank you. So the question is, what is the state of diagnosis and treatment and the approach to the diagnosis and treatment? So I think that the thing that I emphasize in all situations, that is fundamentally important that you identify a physician that you wish to work with and work with that physician. So an individual with bipolar disorder, their moods will often be going all over the map, and unfortunately they will get mad at the physician and they will say, I don't like that mechanics guy, I don't want anything to do with them, and so I'm going to go to another doctor. And then they go to that doctor and they get another set of ideas, and then they go from pillar to post without any real coherence in the formulation of the problem and a formal trajectory and plan to manage the illness. So the most important thing to remember about bipolar disorder is that the management of this illness, like any disorder of human health, it's a collaboration between the individual with the disorder and the treatment team that's providing care. And so the importance of working forward over time, over the months, over the years, they're not going to get it right in the first go-around. Often it will take numerous trials and numerous evaluations and potentially numerous admissions to hospital, but you need to have a good physician that will help you through, interacting with the hospitals where they're admitted and continuing on. Now that is utopia. I appreciate that. That is a situation that for most people it doesn't exist, but that is what we should be striving for. And in fact, having a good psychologist or a good therapist to be able to help and guide one along those lines. But that's the ideal situation.
And the appreciation of being able to give history. So we advise, especially in the context of young people who may not be very good at self-reporting or may not be as articulate about what's going on. I can't overemphasize the importance of family and the important role that not only can they play in the effective treatment and delivery of services, but at that initial state of diagnosis, the outside eye, the supportive answers are often very instrumental in helping to guide not only the diagnosis, but the mode of treatment and intervention.
And so I just want to thank you all. I think that we're probably to the end of the question, but I want to also refer you to the websites that we have. The University of Michigan, the Depression Center, has a phenomenal toolkit website, and therein you can get really good information, solid information about how to manage disorders of mood. We also have information with regards to substance abuse,
Yes.
And the Prector program has an excellent website just to learn about what's going on. We have individuals who share their experiences, and so they'll write about their experiences with bipolar disorder, and we have identified resources. So I would really encourage you to spend time visiting the website. We also are delighted to send you, we have newsletters, so we have things to keep in touch, and so there are ways for you to be on mailing lists and get information on a regular basis or such as the case may be, however often we get them out, which is usually every quarter and then an annual newsletter, but it helps keep in touch. And one of the things that I want to also state is that participating in research is a way to connect with knowledge. And the individuals that I work with in our research program, they will say things to me like, Dr. Minos, I'm just feeling so much better that I'm participating in the research. And so they make statements like that and say, and it's because, they're asked, well, how are you feeling? And it just asks me every so often, how am I feeling? And just that question is very helpful. And so I want to ring the bell for research and the advancement of knowledge. And so with that, I think
Yes.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.